For those people who haven't met me, my name is Ruth Cook. I'm the Managing Director and the founder of Action Learning Associates. We've been going for 21 years. And obviously, although we specialise in action learning and action learning facilitation, we do, of course, do standard facilitation of teams, of boards, of staff groups. So it's that I'm going to focus on today. So let me tell you the agenda for today. I hope. Just one moment. My screen has now frozen. That's great. Hang on one moment. I'm going to move. Right, thank you. The agenda for today. We're going to talk about the role of the facilitator, and I'm going to talk about best practice. I'm going to talk about worst practice as well, as a way of illustrating best practice, and then the type of interventions that you can use as a facilitator. My plan is to talk for about 15-20 minutes, and then the rest of the session is answering your questions. And so we'll open a screen later, a question and answer screen. So we'd ask you to hold on to your questions till we get to that point, rather than use the chat function and potentially distract people. So yeah, if you can hold on to that. I guess those of us who do facilitation quite often can get a bit stale in our facilitation practice. And what I hope is that this webinar stimulates you, refreshes you, and offers you the opportunity for reflection. So let's start with the role of the facilitator. The facilitator, first of all, needs to be absolutely clear about what needs to be achieved. And then to structure the process and hold the process, hold both the process and the group so that that can be achieved. In my facilitation practice, I would always want to agree the aims, not only with the person who's brought me in, maybe the team leader or the chair of the board or whatever, but I would also want to check that with other people who are going to be participating in the day. Ideally, everybody, individually or in small groups. But if that's not possible, then when you actually get together, I would suggest that there are some aims that are visible to everybody, and then there's an opportunity for people to say what they want out of the day. And sometimes surprising things can emerge at that point. Maybe the agenda that you've been given isn't actually what people want to talk about at all. And maybe there's some completely unknown factor. So I'm just thinking about some facilitation training I did recently for Atlantic fellows working in America and in the UK, and they were all meeting together in Dublin at 2 universities and research teams coming together. And I'd been given a brief about what they wanted to cover, but actually nobody had said to me that quite often people had to facilitate across 2 sites, and some people would be in the room and some people would be on a video screen. And that makes a huge difference to how you facilitate and the techniques you use. So it's this kind of vital bit of information that no one had given me. So I would want to agree what people want, and that emerged at the point where people could say what they wanted from the day. And then the facilitator needs to negotiate the ground rules that are going to achieve those aims. You know, what is it that the group knows about how they work together and the patterns that they might fall into, which would stop them achieving their aims? And then what are the ground rules which would enable them to achieve their aims? So you've negotiated with them, they're the ground rules that they've all signed up to. And then the facilitator needs to be sufficiently outside of the process, if you like, hovering above it, so to speak, because they need to be the person who tests assumptions in the group, who observes what's happening, who builds support for what you're generating, who can review it and work towards achieving the aims. So the facilitator's role is also to help the group examine not only their output, but their process. So they have, with the group, achieved what has been asked. But crucially, they've also learned something about working together. So this is the worst things a facilitator might do. If you like, it's the facilitator from hell. I'm sure we've all seen some of these. I hope you haven't seen all of them in one session. So this terrible facilitator is just not aware enough of what's going on in the room. They're oblivious to what the group is thinking or needing. They're never checking concerns. They're not noticing that half the group are asleep or distracted or on their mobiles or appearing to be checking emails. So yeah, they're really not there using all their perceptions to work out what's happening. They're also maybe using their power. The person with the flip chart pen is very powerful, and they may be using that power to subtly change the meaning of what people are saying. The worst type of facilitator is not serving the group, but is making themselves the center of attention. And I guess we've all known, I certainly can think of some people who are brilliant trainers, who are, put them in the front of a lecture hall and they're wonderful and engaging, but they're not good facilitators. And it's because their ego gets in the way, and then they try to be the center of attention. They're not in service of the group. So the worst facilitator also ignores conflict and even generates conflict by putting someone down or getting drawn into a personality battle. So to continue with this description, the worst things, letting somebody dominate, or letting a few people dominate, not checking how people are finding the session, and sticking to what they plan to do, whatever happens. So, we all need a toolkit so that you've actually got a plan B and maybe a plan C and plan D of things that you might do if what you're doing clearly isn't working or there's no energy for it. So, for example, I suggest that we do a SWOT as a way into thinking about the future of this organisation, and people start rolling their eyes, and you realise they did a SWOT last week internally and they really, really aren't up for doing it again. So you need to offer some alternative. What's great about what we do and what needs to change in what we do might be an alternative. So this worst facilitator ignores the power dynamics in the group and is oblivious to who is participating and who isn't. And they're not exploring, is that because there are certain people who don't feel able to contribute, or is it that the group is not enabling them? So there can be overt and covert behaviours that mean some people don't contribute. I've mentioned inappropriate humour. So humour can sometimes be useful, but potentially dangerous. I also think that the facilitator needs to challenge things if things overrun. So you can go into an organisation and there is the norm of it starting late and ending late. And I, as a facilitator, would not let something end late. I would see it's my responsibility to get the group to achieve what they set out to achieve within the time available. And if that becomes apparent that that's impossible, then again, it's negotiating that at a certain time within the group. Okay, at lunchtime, we had 5 things we're going to cover and we haven't got beyond the first one. So do you want me to divide up the time between the other 4, or do we renegotiate what's achievable in this day? So let's come to the best things a facilitator might do. And obviously, to a certain extent, these are the opposite. But I think it's helpful to be explicit about best practice. So the facilitator sets the tone. They've agreed with people what needs to be achieved, and then they are constantly aware of how to get there and what is happening in the room. The facilitator is serving the group's needs. So they're staying neutral, especially if there's conflict. It's really important that the facilitator is perceived by everyone as neutral. And the facilitator is making it clear that everyone has something to contribute. So even if there is a hierarchy in the room, it doesn't mean that those people dominate, the more powerful people dominate. There's the possibility for everyone to contribute from their perspective. A good facilitator is very aware of energy levels in the room. So maybe it's that sluggish after lunch slot, or it could be a stop, but that slot after lunch. Or maybe it's a residential program, a retreat, and first thing in the morning is really difficult because everyone stayed up too late. So you as a facilitator might have some other activities you want to suggest. You might have to move to people doing some physical movement, or taking an extra coffee break, or having some energizers. You might ask them what they need, but you're aware of what's happening in the group and the energy levels. So to continue, the best things a facilitator can do. A really good facilitator is flexible and agile. They're able to accurately record what's said by the group. So ideally, you capture on a flip chart, I'm assuming, but you capture exactly what people have said. And if that isn't possible and you have to summarize it, then it's really important that you check that your summary is an accurate perception of what people said. If you change it, that really undermines the contribution of some people in the group. I would ensure that if I'm the person taking the notes of the session, or if there's somebody in the room who's doing that, who's a scribe for the session, that the organisation themselves takes the flip chart notes away. You've probably all seen those big events where it ends up being typed up by the facilitator and is pretty meaningless to anybody who wasn't there, or it's a series of photos that go into one document that's probably never opened again. So I think it's important there's some ownership, and the output from the group stays with the organisation. So the best thing is to have a wide range of facilitation tools. You know, at the most basic, a good facilitator knows how to do a brainstorm properly, and is able to do, you know, simple things like, okay, so we've got all these options. What are the evaluation? In what way should we evaluate those options, and agreeing that, and then perhaps creating a grid and enabling people to do that, or to discuss the pros and cons of each option, and a weighting system. Maybe you need to introduce some problem solving tools such as Fishbone, or other problem solving tools that you'll know. End positively, almost whatever. However difficult, however challenging the day, it's really helpful if you can get people to say what they're taking away that's been positive about it. So that it ends on a positive note and everyone's contributed to that. So let's go on to the language of facilitation. And these are ways in which you can think about the language that you're using as a facilitator. First of all, there's paraphrasing to check your understanding. So not necessarily rephrasing something, but maybe a form of summarizing to check where the group has got to and where it needs to go to. There's reporting behavior. So the facilitator is a person who's kind of hovering above, seeing what's happening, and they might need to say something about that. I'm noticing that only 2 people are contributing to this discussion. So you're reporting what you're seeing, and that's, especially if you're an external facilitator, that's something very useful that you can offer. People can get into patterns that they're completely unaware of. So you're describing feelings. I think that it's helpful not to kind of lay your feelings on the group, but sometimes to be aware of things that maybe are more than just you who's feeling them. If you're feeling frustrated, it's quite likely that a fair proportion of people in the room are feeling frustrated as well. So something like, I feel as if we've been here before, or I feel as if we're looping back to the discussion we had this morning, can be a useful way of breaking through what's happening. And then perception checking. So you appear cross. Are you cross? Maybe you're not cross. Maybe that's just your standard way of looking. Or you appear upset, and actually you may have a streaming cold. You know, you need to check out your perceptions. So the last slide is the types of intervention that a facilitator might make. An open question: what, where, when, why, how? Those questions which open up the discussion. An overhead question. So this would be addressed to the whole group. What solutions have we found to this in the past? So again, it opens it up. A direct question. Now that might be aimed at one person. So, you know, it's a question about budgets, and actually you feel, and future expenditure, and you feel that the boss needs to come in and answer that. So you might direct a question directly to the boss within a team, for example. A redirected question. So this is where the contribution gets rephrased as a question, and it's addressed to somebody else. So if people are getting stuck, you might know that there's somebody who could perhaps unlock it, and you might redirect that question to them. A relay question. What do you all feel about what's just been said? So you're opening it up and relaying it from one person to another. And a reverse question, when someone makes a statement and you pose it back to them as a question. That's really helpful. What's your view on that? So, you know, that maybe the person who constantly throws in the negative, to throw it back with a reverse question to them. So obviously there's a lot more that could be said about facilitation. And the limitation of a webinar is that there isn't an opportunity for you to practice facilitation, which would what we'd be setting up if we were running a whole day program on it. But let's move now to your questions. So I'm just going to go back to the ones at the beginning about trust. How do you create trust, and how do you change the energy levels in a room? I think that the way in which you create trust is to have some kind of exercise where people get to know each other. So ideally, even if it's a team who've worked together for some time, I would get them to do some sort of exercise of introducing themselves to each other, even if they've worked together for 20 years. And, you know, we've got a stock of ways in which we do that. And people often say, I never knew that about you. I never knew that about you. So that can be really useful of creating some trust, creating some new connections, and you've probably got your favorites for doing that. We've certainly got ours. And then if it's an event that's happening over several days or on several occasions, I also think that part of the way that you build up trust is and create an open and trusting environment, Sim, is that you get people to say how they are at the beginning of, say it's day 2, or it's you've come back a week later. So, what's been going on for you? How are you right now? And an opportunity for people to say, actually, this is how I am as a person. That's a way in which you might, you might build openness and trust. And on the question, positive energy in a room when you've got people who are not keen to be there with you. Yeah. We've often seen that, I think. So it helps if you've met people in advance. It helps if people have told you what they think needs addressing as part of a team day, for example. And even so, you might have people who really don't want to be there for a variety of reasons. And you're probably aware of that by their body language or by their participation level. And they can, yes, it's true, Kerry, they can be a real energy drain on the group. So I would hope that you could make it explicit. You might decide that that's too dangerous, or that some people are vulnerable and you wouldn't want to do that. But if you can, you can ask people, how are the energy levels? How would you rate yourself? Or a little chart. Where would you put yourself right now? Stick your sticker on. It doesn't even have to have your name on, but just a way of kind of alerting people to the energy levels, and making explicit, perhaps as part of the ground rules, what you expect from people in terms of participation, and that you're asking them to be fully present and to put away other distracting things. Okay, a difference between, so Thomas is asking, what's the difference between a trainer and facilitator? And yes, and sometimes you do need to go between those two modes. So the trainer is somebody who's there to deliver some content. Now, they may do that in a facilitative kind of way, and they may have sessions that they facilitate in response to the content that they've delivered, but essentially they're there to introduce leadership or team development or project management or whatever it is. There's some content that they're responsible for enabling the group to learn. Whereas with a facilitator, their prime function is to help the group achieve something that they've identified or someone's identified that the group needs to achieve. That's what they're there for. And the facilitator isn't introducing content. The facilitator is holding the process and is using tools that will enable the content to emerge. But essentially, the content comes from the group. That's what I see as the difference. So I'm just going to come down and see some other questions. Relay questions. So this would be, supposing you've got a discussion that's just going backwards and forwards between two people, and it's really in adversarial mode, and you want to change the energy, you want to get more people involved in that. So a relay question would be actually posing that question to somebody else or to different people within the group. So you're asking them to respond and moving it from being dominated by one or two people. I'm seeing that some people are having a problem, so I will actually read out the questions as I answer them. So that was Miles asking, can you tell me more about relay questions? Sim had asked about how do you create an open and trusting environment? And Kerry had asked about how positive energy when you have participants who don't want to be there. I'm just going to go on to other people who haven't asked anything yet. How to work with facilitators who have different ways of working to yourself. Yeah, this can be challenging, Nicola. When you're working as a team, part of a team of facilitators, and maybe their style is very different to your own, I would definitely say that you need to have an open and trusting environment in the team, and you need to have talked about it beforehand. So ideally, this isn't your first time of working together, but even if it is, you've talked about the kind of ground rules between you as to how you're going to operate, who's in charge of which sessions, and what's the ground rule between you about whether other people can come in. I don't know if you've ever seen those sessions where it seems like there's a team of facilitators who are all chipping in on each other's sessions, and you're not sure who's in charge, who's in control. I think what happens is that then replicates within the room, and the potential is for confusion and chaos. So that, you know, maybe you agree nobody intervenes on each other's session, you just leave it to each other to be responsible for that bit of it. Or maybe you've got a signal between you about, I really think you need to do this or that, and you're okay at other people coming in. Zoe asks, what advice do you have for dealing with a participant who's potentially derailing and dominating the discussion? Yeah, I think we've all had those, haven't we? So you need to be assertive about it. Everybody else in the group can see what's happening as well as you, probably. So if you don't tackle it, then they're going to see you as not handling it. So both for the purpose of what you're trying to achieve, but also for how you're seen as a credible facilitator, you need to deal with a participant who's dominating or derailing. And you need to do it in a way that isn't judgmental, that isn't going to put that person down or make them feel like they can't contribute anything else to the day, and they may well be a very powerful person. So, you know, you risk moving out of neutrality if you alienate them, and you risk the group dividing and some people feeling that you need to support that person, etc. So lots of things could go wrong if you do it in the wrong way. So in a way that, gently, thank you for your contribution. I really appreciate that we've heard a lot about your reservations about X or Y. I want to now open it up to other people who haven't had a chance to speak. So you're not putting them down, but you're opening it up and you're taking charge of the process. And if that person then came in again immediately, I would say, I'm asking you to pause, and I want to let other people come in at this point. Fishbone, okay, I'll just give you can read about it. It's a problem-solving technique where you identify the problem, which is the kind of backbone of the fishbone, of the fish, backbone of the fish. And then, so you need some agreement about what the problem is. And then you would identify, I'm going to display my ignorance on biology here, because you then identify all the other bones that come off the main bone. So you can actually draw a fishbone. And so what are all the elements that make up this problem? So we agree that people aren't getting a good service when they come into reception. That's the problem. So what are all the elements of that? Staff behaviour, waiting times, the reception area, all of the elements. And then you might break it down into further little bones. What are all the elements that contribute to the waiting area not being good? And so on. So that you've got, at the end, a comprehensive picture of the problem and all the elements that make up the problem. And you then go on to work on different elements. Okay. Sorry, excuse me. Do you have tips for facilitating meetings and workshops where some people are in the room and some are video conference and calling in? Oh, It's really tough, isn't it, Araba? I really think that this is a particular facilitation skill. And well, for example, in action learning, and this may not be true when you're running an event for a team or a board or something where some people have to join by video conference. In action learning, we say that people need to all be on a level playing field, and so we'd ask everyone to be on video conference or all be in the room, and you wouldn't have some people joining it. And that's because the people who are in the room have access to other data about what's happening. You know, maybe there's something that's causing people to laugh that's just happened in the room, and the person who's joining by video conference doesn't know that. So in an ideal world, it wouldn't happen. And then we all know that it does happen. Well, I was talking about the Dublin event, where we ended up spending, a third of the day on this topic, really. How do you make it effective for two groups to work together when they're on either side of the Atlantic? So there was some good experience in the room that they all shared with each other. I wouldn't say that I'm expert in this, and I don't have any easy answers. I think it does require really skillful intervention. It requires good technology, requires skillful handling on the part of the facilitator, remembering to bring that person in to check that they can hear okay, that they can see okay what's going on, and that they have opportunities to contribute, and that other people are patient and generous about that and allow those people to contribute. We could run a whole session on that. We could probably run a whole day on that. And so I'm aware that's a very limited answer. Can we facilitate, Alessandra asks, can we facilitate a group in a process where we want them to head to a given direction? Or is this more training like? No, I think it is facilitation if you've got an agreed direction. So what I'm going to facilitate is a discussion on how we get to be more customer oriented, for example, more service oriented, or how we improve our service. Now that would be, there is a given direction, and you're making sure that the group stays on theme for that day. I wouldn't say that that's training. It's training if you start to introduce a whole load of material that helps them get to that direction, and then you might need to move into training mode. But if you've got a general direction, that's fine if that's what you've been given. Howard asks, is there a way to find group consensus? And yeah, so I'm laughing because I happen to be a Quaker, and Quakers have a particular way of finding group consensus, and but it can be very slow. And Quakers would always wait, listen to all points of view, and then try to draft something there and then which represents a record of what they've all agreed, and checks that there and then within the meeting. As a facilitator, I think there can be some times where you do have to have a vote on things. So say, for example, you've only got a limited amount of time left in the afternoon, and you've got 4 topics that people want to discuss. You might have to say, who's, okay, we're going to run through these 4, and who's got the energy and would like to, thinks this is the most important thing, and we're going to vote on which of the 4 you want. You might have a voting system where you put a number of topics up, and you tell people they've got 5 dots, and they could either spread them equally, or they could put all 5 on one if they feel passionately about something. Yeah, I guess you would need to be clear how crucial is it in terms of group process for them to reach consensus, and then to take a view as a facilitator about whether or not that's possible. it may not be possible, and then what are the consequences of that? So, you know, if you've got someone who's a commissioner, then that's something you would talk about with them in advance. In short workshops, what do you do when you want everyone to contribute equally, and you have strong reflectors who need time to process learning without directing a question at them? Yes, for directing a question or relaying a question to someone who's a strong reflector would be intimidating, I agree. So for any topic, I like to give people time to think about it on their own individually. It could be because I'm a reflector. So I like to, you know, here's what we're thinking about next. Here's a bit of time for you to work on that on your own, so that you've got time to, you know, process your things yourselves. You're not suddenly thrown into it. And then there might be a stage before you come back into the large group where it's, okay, talk about it in 2s or 3s, or 3s or 4s, you know, small groups where people are more able to identify the sort of big things out of the question that's been posed, and then bring that back into the large group. Sarah says, I think the most common problem is that the purpose and aims of the session are not set in advance and agreed at the start. It seems such an obvious thing to do, but seldom happens, particularly in the public sector. Yes, I think that's true. That can often happen, and you can be brought in as the facilitator, and it's unclear why people are even in the room, and they're not clear about why they're in the room, and that's really, really difficult. We're coming towards the end. No, I know De Bono 6 hats, but I haven't used it, Miles. So I'm conscious that there are really good questions in here that we haven't got to. I think it's not possible, Claire, for me to be able to share within the webinar the tools for brainstorming and option evaluation, etc. And what the level of interest that has been shown in this webinar, the number of people signing up, etc., has made us think that as well as our action learning facilitation training that we offer, we should also consider running a program on general facilitation skills, and that would be an opportunity to practice those things, to practice brainstorming and managing options, etc., and get some feedback on it, as well as trying them out. So there's a load more questions here, and I'm really sorry not to be able to answer them all, because there's some very interesting questions. I would offer that people can come back to me and email me if you've got a question that we haven't answered, and I'd be very happy to have an exchange with you or book a time to talk to you. And it may be that we should have a second webinar on this topic, because it has been useful. So I'm just going to return, I hope, to the PowerPoint screen and move to the final one. Apologies. Okay, so if you'd like a telephone conversation, then feel free to get in touch. I've really appreciated the range of questions that we've had today. And I can see that what great interest there's been in this. We run a 3-day program which is specific to action learning facilitation, and that's either in-house or an open program in London that individuals can sign up to. And we also provide that program virtually. But this has made us think about, should we be considering running an open program on general facilitation skills. Okay, we're going to have a closing poll. It is possible to have a recording of this, so the recording will be available on the website. If you'd like these slides, I can circulate the slides, and I'm very happy to do that. And if we could, yeah, if you just email me all those people who've registered will add you to our database unless you say no. So, you know, feel free to unsubscribe, but we'll add you to the database and get you, and then you'll get regular news from us. But feel free to email me, and I'm then happy to share the slides with you.